Welcome, and good to have you along. And today I'm talking about writing a book, and I do hope this will be helpful. So, first thing, let's go through some of the basics. There are enormous amount of questions associated with this. How do you find the time? What genre would you actually write in? How do you start? What if I have writer's block? How do I work with that amount of detail? And will I have enough to say as this project unfolds? These are these are questions I think that is good to have. I think the questions, which by the way I think you should write down, are very important. There is nothing worse than struggling with not just an answer, but not knowing the question. And so I suggest you write as many things down as possible. Your phone is ideal for this. I text myself constantly, and at the end of the day, I will collate those comments into a writing journal because they come randomly. Some of them could be observations, some of them words, expressions, circumstances. And these are of interest, and they strike me as being significant and relevant. And so I put them down and text them to myself. And of course, that makes it convenient. I would not suggest you try and remember them at the end of the day, and they will have drifted in and out as quickly as they occurred. So that's one thing I think you should do. So let's think a bit about the genre that you would write to. So 20 years ago, I had authored about 16 textbooks. These are engineering and mathematics books. And so nonfiction and science and technology. And that type of writing requires a technical expertise as well as strong communication skills. You are restricted into science fact. And so this is a different genre, but in the nonfiction area. And there are others in the nonfiction, autobiographies. You would also have children's books. You will have true crime, travel, self-help. These are all examples. This is what triggered me. I had been writing my textbooks. There were 16 of them. They were used in universities and colleges to teach engineering. And I was coming up with a new edition, and an editor had spoken to the parent company editor and said, I like those short stories that he's done on people in the industry. Has he ever thought about writing a book? This is the point that triggered, have you got that book in you moment. And that's good for you to discover when that occurred. Is it the one that motivated you? I don't think it did. That is further back, where I was always thinking about it. And so this maybe cross over into the line of fiction. Fiction, there is a lot there for you to choose from. And that could be anything from suspense thrillers to fantasy, mystery, horror, historical fiction. And that brings up another interesting question that you should be asking yourself. C.S. Lewis said, "We read to know we are not alone." And that's an interesting philosophical statement there. Um, do we read to resonate with that author and therefore feel connected? There is a famous Carl Sagan quote about books, and I'll paraphrase, but he talks about what a wonderful thing a book is, because when you open that book and begin to read, you are immediately connected into the mindset of that author. The two of you are connected. And that opens up this question as to what would be your genre? Which one would you choose? And I'd like you to examine it from what do you read and what would you like to write? Those are two different things. And I believe that they're not always connected. So, for example, I read exclusively historical fiction. So these are fictional characters in historical events. The history is non-fiction. The characters are fiction. And so I am taken on a journey through history. And I never leave the Royal Navy fighting the French in the Napoleonic Wars. So this is what I read, and yet when it came to what genre and what will I write, it was entirely different. And that was suspense thrillers. I think there was a great influence from movies and the screen. So, and now there are 6 suspense thrillers in a series out there. So I'm going to focus on writing those books because I believe that this would be very helpful for you. On face value, it appears that this would be much easier than the textbooks. The textbooks have so much technical expertise in there, and that's a requirement that would have a higher bar to cross in order to be able to write that. Whereas the novels are much more difficult because you have to have all of that in your mind and know where you are going, the characters, the plots, the setting, the narrative rhythm, the descriptions, the locations, and that all has to come together. We are drawn to what we like. And I like suspense thrillers, to write suspense thrillers, but not to read suspense thrillers. Strange, but I like them. They have a story to unpick. They have a strong conversation with the reader. They have they have situations with fun and humor, which are driven by circumstance. And there is also rich characters, rich descriptions, settings, and environments. And that is just pleasing for me to write. It is something that I feel drawn to. And this is a question you should ask yourself. Where did that come from? It actually came from the textbooks. I was doing short stories on people in the industry. They were called vignettes. I did them at the front of every chapter. My editor liked them and asked if I could do them for every single book. Now, this was an enormous exercise. What she did not know is they took about 4 or 5 days to write 4 to 5 paragraphs. And that's because I had to read the autobiographies and every piece of information that I could find on that particular person. But I was looking for something personal, not their technical contribution, but more the person behind the invention or the innovation. And that was the essence for what I was interested in. And then I was using it as an educational exercise. So a good example of this would be Charles Steinmetz, who in the 1930s was a very gifted electrical engineer, and he was asked to go to a factory that had been shut down for many, many months to diagnose a problem. He took 5 minutes looking at the schematics and then another 5 minutes examining the symptoms, and then took a piece of chalk, scratched an X on one of the cabinets and said, replace it, and left. They replaced that cabinet, everything worked perfectly, but they were shocked to find that he submitted a bill for $1,000, which in 1930 was rather excessive for 10 minutes work. And so they wrote back politely, but with an element of directness, saying that, could you itemize that bill? And so he wrote back to them saying $1 for making the mark and $999 for knowing where to make the mark. So this carried a very good message for students that they were getting an education and learning technical skills, and those technical skills would be actually very valuable for them. It would mean they can garner higher wages, and even stretched it to the physical labor of $1 of scratching the X. You get $1 for physical, and you get 999 for mental labor. So these are the sort of vignettes that I put together, and this is what was noticed by the editor who was in fiction, and this is what triggered the does he have a novel in him. So this was my first foray into a different area, and I found it fascinating. I found it still that you could gain from this, and that was a slight difference for me. I found it this would give me more than I imagined I could get from it. So this is a question: where are you going? What motivates you to do this? And how do I answer all those questions? Because there are a lot of questions. And it's good that they have them. Keep writing them. Keep challenging yourself. Keep making yourself think. So let's move on now to how do we break it down? Rene Descartes was an analytical genius from a long time ago. He came up with a 4-step process for solving a problem. And I find that part 2 and part 3 of that are very, very good at helping you solve any problem. And these 2 steps are that you must break down the problem into as many pieces as you can, and then start with the simplest part. So there is a tendency that we feel we should begin at the beginning, and you could end up bogging yourself down with, I've got to have a title. And like naming companies, this bogs people down, and they spend an inordinate amount of time wasting their time on that element. And the same thing with the book. that title may come to you in the beginning, the middle. It could actually be the last word you write in the novel. So I would not try and have a title, just have a row of question marks or unknowns there and move on. And then the next question is, what's chapter 1? And again, I don't think you should worry about that. Is your first chapter what you have actually been thinking about, or is it a midpoint? If it's the midpoint, then we need to use Descartes' method, which is to start with the simplest parts. So if you have an idea of a particular chapter and you have envisioned that in your mind, for me, it plays almost as a movie in my mind. And then it becomes, can I capture it? Can I capture it accurately? There's a lot of group dynamics going on with the characters, the setting, the plot, everything is happening. But I would work on that first. I would get that down and then spend a lot of time writing, rewriting, until you find that you have refined that to what you believe is exactly what you saw in your mind, exactly what you imagined it to be, and you have captured it the way you want. That writing and practicing is vital. So with my first novel, I have been asked, how many times did you rewrite? And that, if we're not counting editing, just rewriting, I'd say it was in the high 20s. And so you're looking for ways to re-examine again. And a strange situation occurred, and I think this is helpful. It occurs a lot in science. If we can come in at a different angle, a different perspective, this is very, very helpful to us. So, and the same thing happens with the novel. So strangely, my novels, in the first one, it went to the editor in question, who liked the vignettes, and she said, well, if you're going to I need you to have 3 novels in play, planned out. You cannot be a one-hit wonder. If we invest a huge amount of money into the promotion, we need to know you have legs. We would like a novel a year at least, and so we want to see that you have that ability. So I worked on 3 novels. Now these 3 just randomly got the interest of the William Morris Agency in Beverly Hills, and I went there to talk to the head of story department regarding the adaptation of the novel, the first novel, to a screenplay. So this required learning the form of a screenplay and how it differs from a novel. And there are some interesting differences there. Novels are generally third person, and you get inside the thoughts and the feelings, the emotions of the character, which are conveyed in the novel, rich descriptions. A screenplay is slightly different. It is first person, short descriptions of locations, and then the entire visual screen blueprint, if you will, is 1 page for every minute, and it is driven by dialogue. So this is a slightly different form, and it required some learning. And as I started to adapt, I found that this gave me great insight. It would actually help me to come in from an entirely different angle. At the end of the exercise, I examined the screenplay in the novel and found that the screenplay had some elements in it which were really good. In fact, some of the action elements, some of the elements where my character needed to do things to engineer himself out of a problem were done better in the screenplay than they were in the novels. So this then sent me back to the novel to adapt those pieces into the novel and then enrich and enhance the novel further. This created, of course, a chain reaction, because then the screenplay became less than the adapted, enhanced novel. And so a cycle of adaptation and revision took place, and the end result is both were taken to a higher level of exactly what I wanted them to be. And so this was something of a good exercise. And so this is something that you might not use that, but you might decide that's exactly what to use. The screenplay is easy to see. I would recommend, what is your favorite novel? And what is your favorite movie? If you have a movie that sticks out, see if you can buy the screenplay version or find online the screenplay version of that movie. This will then let you see the blueprint that they used to create that movie. This then will be your blueprint on how you could write a screenplay version of your book. And whatever that book is, it could be a children's book. This would help you if they were to option your book for the screen. The authors are generally asked to involve themselves in that screenplay because they are the source. And so you could find yourself involved in that process anyway. So, and it's good to have that expertise. So I would recommend that it's a good exercise, even though it seems like I should stay focused on the novel and not stray. I would say the more ways you can come into this, the better. It's going to break down into two parts: the idea and the execution. And the execution is going to be critical. There are three parts to any book, and that is, they call them the three acts. Act one is the setup. You set up, introduce your characters, introduce your setting, introduce the plot and what the story is, where it is going, and the why. Act two, is the confrontation, and this is where everything gets flushed out, and the sparks fly, or the main part, the essential element, the essential ingredients of it are conveyed. And then the last one, Act 3, is the conclusion. So this is sometimes difficult in many ways to bring what has been something that has splintered apart, broken apart, exploded into this huge piece, is now you have this need to bring all of it together and bring it to a conclusion. Again, I don't think you should focus on the entire project. I think it's too much to encapsulate everything in your mind. That is too difficult. I remember a quote from Mozart that his music was written down as though was copying it from an already rough draft. And in fact, he wasn't. He had felt and heard the entire orchestral movement in his mind and was merely copying it down, which is why he had no marks, no corrections, there were no scribbles, no edits, no nothing. I think that is something that the rest of us mortals can't actually do. So I would recommend that you just take Descartes' method, focus on pieces. You might be going backwards. There could be a piece in the middle, for example, which I use to move back to chapter 1. Chapter 1 is generally a prologue for me, in which it is an exciting scene in which my character is in dire straits. And the question then becomes, how did he get there? What elements, what parameters were at play to put him into that position? And then I normally jump to 3 months earlier, and then we go through the sequence of events to get to that point. So writing that first would be very, very difficult because I have no idea on the sequence myself leading up to that. Sometimes I plan out what is a rough idea of a story, what elements are involved in that story, and then begin. But begin wherever it is easiest to begin, and then move forward. So now we're back to talking about other elements that can help you. Microsoft Word has a feature called Read Aloud. This is particularly helpful because it allows you to switch between writer and reader. And that is a good transition for you to make during the process. So many times, if you've written a paragraph section and you want to actually see how that reads, how it feels, how it sounds, the read aloud section in any of the word processors, I'm sure it is available, is very helpful to you. So can be very helpful. So write it, and then typically when I finish a chapter, I will automatically go through a read and switch to a reader, the read aloud. So that's a very helpful one. If we finish and get the book published, that sounds like simple steps. I was asked a while ago, how did you find your publisher? 20 years ago, when the novels were written and I was submitting over 1,500 submissions and no responses. An editor did tell me that she typically has thousands of submissions a week, many of them unsolicited, many of them that do not have agents, and she does not always pay attention to this bulk. They are given assignments that this week they are looking for a children's book, let's say, that has steampunk elements to it. And so if my suspense thriller arrives on her desk at that particular time, it is discarded and swept away and does not see the light of day. So timing is almost in the realms of miraculous here. And that makes it very, very difficult to find a publisher and get to that particular point. There was a story which I connected to years ago. The author of The Yearling, which was a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, uh, was so frustrated with her experiences with trying to be published that after winning the prize, she changed the title of her novel and sent it out again to editors. And it was not just rejected, and ignored, but also they wrote back quite scathing um, uh, reviews of exactly what they thought of it. And so that lets you know that it isn't personal. And you really have to focus on somewhat keeping your day job, because this will require an investment of time and effort. And you're doubling your time now because you're generally working at the same time that you're writing. And so that makes for a difficult schedule. However, you're here and you're listening to this, and you're listening to this at the back end right now because you're motivated and because you want to do this. And 20 years ago, I stopped for a while, and that's because a strange situation occurred. My my main character needed a technology for the third book, and so I came up with an idea to meet that need, and looked at it and thought, actually, that's pretty good. Actually, that looks like it might work. So I did math modeling, and the math modeling came out much better than I could have imagined, which made me believe that I had definitely got something wrong. So I kept going back over it, looking at the energy budget from one end to the other, and trying to work out where my math was inaccurate. And by chance, I was going to a Halloween party. I mentioned it to somebody who I did not know, and he talked to his boss. And the next day, I went up for lunch to meet the boss, who then wanted to pursue that technology. So we launched a startup. And 4 years later, it was sold to a Fortune 500 company. And I had 50 odd patents to my name. And that is another form of writing, and that we can address at a later video, and another angle of coming in at something. So all advantageous. So the question then becomes, how do you go from scientist to novelist? And the answer is, it's all creativity. And I believe that you have that creative interest, and you have that desire. And I think that, I hope that this has been helpful. And I do hope that you've enjoyed this video. And please let me know if you'd like me to focus in on more. I will break down these parts and address them in more detail in future videos. Otherwise, thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you again. Thank you.